Welcome to the show where we unearth new ways of looking at ever-evolving life around the world, seen from a number of different industries, cultures, and backgrounds. But there's one thing that unites everyone I speak to. They all want to do their part to make the world better in their own unique ways. It's a uniting passion. Whether they're from the commercial world, third sector, or public sector, from the global north or the global south, my name is Philippa White, and welcome to TIE Unearthed. As the world of business becomes somewhat obsessed with technology, it's perfecting the functional experience at the expense of the human experience. Companies are doing this to supposedly be more efficient, but organizations are now full of humans who are not allowed to act in a human way. And it turns out the best way for companies to increase their efficiency is to make things better for customers, which actually means creating a more human experience for people. In short, things are heading in the wrong direction. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Hello and welcome to episode 71 of TIE Unearthed. Today, I'm speaking with John Sills, managing partner at the customer-led growth company, The Foundation. 25 years ago, he started his career on a market stall in Essex, and since then has worked in and with companies around the world to make things better for customers. He's been in frontline teams delivering the experience, innovation teams designing the propositions, and global headquarter teams creating the strategy. He's been a bank manager during the financial crisis, which, as he says, was not a ton of fun, launched a mobile app to millions of people, which was a lot of fun, and regularly visits strangers' houses to ask very personal questions, which, to quote him, is incredibly fun. He now works with companies across industries and around the world, and before joining the foundation, spent 12 years at HSBC, latterly as head of customer innovation. Now, we're going to be talking about his book on this topic, which is The Human Experience. It was published by Bloomsbury in February of 2023, and his writing has been featured in The Guardian, The FT, and Management Today. This is a super fun, funny, human, and incredibly important conversation. So grab that favorite beverage or throw on those running shoes, and here's John. John, thank you so much for joining us. It's lovely to have you here. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. I'm slightly wet, but I'm very good apart from that.
Yes, clocks changed and we thought it was summer, and it's England.
It's England, so it's never quite summer, but it means you enjoy it more when it is, I think.
That's true. That is true. So just for our listeners, you're obviously in England. Where are you in England?
Yeah. So I'm just outside London. So our office is in King's Cross. I live just outside the M25 because my wife never wanted to live in London, and I always wanted to live in London. So we live as close to the M25 as possible, basically.
Nice. So why don't you tell us a little bit about you before the foundation and before your book, obviously, which we will be talking about, The Human Experience, how to make life better for your customers and create a more successful organization. So I'm really looking forward to talking about that. But let's just back up a little bit because it'd be lovely to just know, who is John Sills?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And thanks for having me on again. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, so I guess my career on that side of things has always been in making things better for customers in various ways. I actually started on a market stall in Essex. So I'm from, any of your listeners that know England well, I'm from Essex in England, just outside London. And I was on a market stall there when I was kind of 14, selling haberdashery of all the things.
Wow.
I had a few years kind of working through various retail places while I was at university. No idea what I wanted to do there. So I did history because I enjoyed it. And then I joined HSBC, and I had 12 years at HSBC. The first few years were in the branch. So I was a branch manager during the financial crisis, which was eye-opening and worrying and scary, but fascinating from a human behaviour perspective at the same time. After saying I'd never work in head office, I went to work in head office and launched our first mobile app. I looked after customer experience globally. And then from there, I met the foundation, met Charlie Dawson at the foundation, and thought I'd quite like to do customer-led things across other organisations as well. So that's kind of been my path, I guess, from the age of about 14 onwards, various locations, various places, but always with customers somewhere at the heart of it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I can completely see, obviously, why Charlie, having met you, oh my God, you're the exact kind of person we need here. It's like you say, I mean, you've been involved in so many different aspects of customer experience, and you're being outside in and understanding sort of the greater world and having that come into the foundation. That's amazing. Yeah,
I think that's it. It's kind of that perspective thing. Because I often say, because I've kind of been in frontline teams with customers, and I've been in kind of head office teams setting the strategy. I've been in innovation teams coming up with the products. But the thing that I think that start enabled me to have is, I still remember some of those customers that used to come and see me on the market stall or when I was in the branches. And it stops you, I think, when you're in the strategy world, just going off on one and coming up with ridiculous ideas, because it helps to ground you a little bit in what really matters. I still remember some of those customers that used to come in and see me, and it's great to kind of have them in mind. So what would they really think about this, and how would they really react? So yeah, it's quite useful, I think, to have this, as long as my memory holds.
Yeah, right. We talked about this obviously before we started recording, but I absolutely adored reading your book. And to say that about a business book, I think is a huge compliment, because business books, as we all know, can be super dry and frameworky and theory. And, as the listeners know, what we do is all about human experiential leadership programs, which are, there's certainly theory as part of it, but the whole point is experiential learning. And for me, I learn so much better through experiences, through stories, through being able to put myself into the situation of someone else. And you totally did that with your book. And it's one of those books that you just, oh my God, yeah, okay, that's so funny. And I found myself, I was lying in bed and my partner was sort of lying there, and I'd suddenly started, he's sort of still kind of going off to sleep. And I had to put my hand in front of my mouth as I started laughing. And I was like, oh my God, that's so funny. And sort of having to, so
thank you.
Yeah,
blushing
really
quite a lot now.
Talk to us about the book and why you wrote it.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really lovely compliment. Thank you. It's there's something slightly odd about when you put any kind of writing out in the world, but it's really nice to get, to know that people react to that. As long as you were laughing at the right part.
Right.
Just awful writing. Like, that's terrible sentence structure. Yeah, so I suppose the book came from a couple of different places. I mean, one was that I've been writing since about 2014. Actually, just before I joined the foundation, I decided to start writing articles. So I've really got into the habit of it and really started loving it. But then about 4 or 5 years ago, I was on holiday with my family, with my wife, and I had one son at the time, he was about 5. And we were on one of those beautiful old steam trains. We'd taken a day out on a steam train, so going through the English countryside, and it had deep leather seats and a really lovely kind of oak panelled table, and this lady walking down with a trolley of really nice homemade food on it. It was perfect. And my son turned to me and he said, "Oh, Daddy, is this what it's like when you get the train into London every day?" And obviously I just kind of laughed and went, "Well, no, like, it's emphatically not. Like, it's the complete opposite. It's an absolute nightmare." And it got me thinking. I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Because surely the sign of progress is that you make things quicker and cheaper and more efficient, but while keeping the level of quality at least the same, if not better. But actually, there's a number of things, I think, in our life generally, but as a customer, where actually in the last 20 years, while we've been making things quicker and easier and cheaper, we've been perfecting the kind of functional experience, we've kind of lost that emotional human experience. We've spent so much time, an organisation has spent so much time focusing on doing more things in more ways more quickly than ever before. But actually, I'm not sure the actual customer experience has got better. In fact, I think it's got worse. I think a lot of us are less happy as customers than we probably were 10 or 20 years ago. And there's good evidence to back that up as well. And I think at some point that needs calling out, and it needs calling out because it's not really acceptable. Because ultimately, at the end of the customer experience is a human that's got their own stress and their own family and their own priorities, and they don't need 45 minutes on hold to IKEA, even if they do play ABBA Gold as their whole music, which they do, and that is quite clever. It is awkward when they then pick up the phone and you're halfway through singing Waterloo. So that's where the idea of the book came from. And then I was in the shower one day, and the thought of human came into my head, and I thought, yeah, that's it. That's the missing link. That's the thing I think that connects together everything I'm trying to say. So I decided there and then I was just going to get going and write the book, and here we are a couple of years later.
It's funny because as we talked about, I'm writing a book. I mean, I'm only sort of 6 months into it, so I've got a little bit to go yet. But what I love about how you put it together, and we talked about that before we started recording as well, just how it's laid out is so wonderful. And you can see the build, you can see the different elements of the importance of humanity. You know, you talk about the competencies. It just seems almost so obvious when you read your book and you think, yeah, we're going in the wrong direction, people. We all kind of have to just open our eyes and sort of say, hold on a second, there's a better way. And how you laid that out was just, you can see that. And then of course, all your stories bring it to life.
I think it's a really important point there as well that, you know, I talk in the book about organizations, it's become that organizations are full of humans who aren't allowed to act in a human way. And I think that's really, if anything, that's kind of the big point. I suppose I probably want people to take from it, because that impacts customers, but it also impacts colleagues as well. You know, a really big part of being motivated at work is empowerment and feeling empowered and feeling like you've got autonomy. And actually this kind of sense of humans becoming robotic and, you know, I would if I could, but I can't, and I'm tired of these processes and procedures. It's really bad for customers, but it's bad for the colleagues as well. But because of the way humans work and organizations work, everyone just kind of accepts this. You get into these organizations, you start to see the world from the inside out, and it just becomes the way things are done around here. It happens in every organization, and that's why, or nearly every organization, and that's kind of why I guess I felt it was important, because I think we do need something to say, well, hang on a minute, this isn't working with colleagues, it isn't working with customers. We need to do it another way. It's
such a good point, and it's funny, it reminds me of the podcast so long ago now, sort of 2 years ago, with Charlie Dawson of the Foundation, of course. And at the time, I was talking to him about a horrible experience that I was having with Sky. And I wanted to cancel Sky. And they kept sort of saying, but hold on, no, you know, I need to pass you to somebody else. And then you're sort of like, I really don't want to talk I literally just want to cancel. No, you need to speak to somebody else. And you're sort of still on the phone 20 minutes later. And they're, no. And they're making it really difficult for you to cancel. And they're going through all these, and no, it's not possible to do it this. You need to call another phone number. And as a customer, you're just obviously getting more and more, you know, it's even more reason why I am never going to go back to Sky. But then as Charlie pointed out, imagine being that person. They know it's wrong. They're having to do this because the system has said you must do this. But they, as human beings, must be feeling terrible inside. Well, exactly. Or not, but I'm sure that they are.
No, they are. And this is the dichotomy of the situation is that everybody knows it's ridiculous. Everybody. Right. Even if you're the CEO of Sky or a managing director or a head of department, everyone knows what it feels like to be that customer on the end of the phone. No one's thinking this is a good experience, but yeah, it still happens. Right. It still happens because all of these incentives and measures and metrics get in the way organizations start to work, the way people are individually measured. All of these things creates this culture. I think Daniel Kahneman once said something about, I can't remember the exact phrase, but people will do the most absurd things if they're surrounded by a group of like-minded individuals, something like that.
Right.
You know, essentially, if you're in a situation where everyone's doing this crazy thing, you kind of go along with it because otherwise you're the crazy one for not going along with it. Groupthink. And this is essentially this on a grand organizational, almost industry-wide scale. I mentioned in the book, but just to call out, there's a brilliant book called Ends by Joe McLeod, which is all about how organizations are just ignoring endings. And actually, if Sky made it really easy to leave, they'd probably be first on your list to consider next time you're thinking of swapping.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
By making it so hard for you to leave, they actually get rid of any brand goodwill, and then they go further down your list next time you'd come back to them. So
that's really interesting. To this point, just from your point of view, you know, why is being human-centric important in your mind?
For a whole host of reasons, actually. Firstly, because I genuinely think this is about making life better for customers. Now, without making this sound more grand than it really is, but in life, if you can make things better for the people around you, that's a pretty good way to spend your life. You know, there's lots of talk about what purpose is and everything else, but broadly, making things better for other people is a good thing. And what I find in organizations is that the ones that are human, they do this. They improve customers' lives. And that's kind of what organizations at their heart should be about. And I'm pretty sure nearly every organization has probably been set up with that purpose. Someone's had an idea about something that can help make people's lives better, and they think they can make money from it. And that's how it should work. But as they grow and grow and grow, that kind of original feeling gets lost. And the problem is that all of these examples that we talk about, and you kind of say in the book, I try and make quite a few of them quite funny, but there is quite a serious point in it, is that this is people's lives being wasted. It's people's stress. People have got enough stress in their lives. I've got 2 kids, I run a business, I've got a mortgage. I need these services to help make everything else better so I can reduce the stress elsewhere and enjoy life, not having to, as I am currently, surrounded by multiple car insurance forms and then post-its of jobs I've got to do, and I've got to phone this company, but they won't answer my call because they've got unexpectedly high call volumes. All of these things that as customers, we kind of laugh off, but there's a serious point that we're spending hours and hours of our lives doing this. I did once try and get an organisation to change its average call waiting time metric in its contact centre to human lives wasted.
I love that. You talk about that in the book.
I do. I thought it'd be a really smart thing that at the end of the year, you count up how long people have been on hold to you, and you convert that into human lives wasted. I thought that would really drive home the point. But they were going to do it. They didn't right at the last minute. They stepped back from it. But it's that kind of thing that we can lose that human thought. The other point, I think, is that if you do design with humans in mind, I think you just come up with better products. And I think that more people will want to stay with you and more people will genuinely want to recommend you. And then you'll have a more successful business. So it is better for customers. But I think nearly every example I give in the book shows actually if you get this right, it's better for the business too. Less failure demand, more people staying with you. It kind of just makes sense.
Totally. And I mean, there's just so many examples. We will get to some examples in a bit. Literally every single chapter has about like 10 stories in each one, just bringing each point to life beautifully. And it does seem so simple, but yet it isn't common, and it's becoming even more less common. Reflecting on, and I actually talked about this in the last podcast, funnily enough, for me, it does drive home the point. I remember when it was in 2001. So I had just arrived in the UK. I had set up a bank. I didn't know anything about banking in the UK. I set up with Barclays. I think I'd only spent about 8 months with Barclays, and I remember and I was not happy. I mean, and to be honest, I was a really lowly paid account executive. I mean, money was not, I had no money. So it's not like I had loans. I didn't have a huge relationship with the bank, but there were some things that I needed to sort out. And it was terrible. Just the experience was terrible. And I remember someone telling me, you realize that you're more likely to divorce your partner than you are your bank. And I remember thinking, what? Oh my God, I am so divorcing this bank. Like there's no way I'm going to be this kind of statistic. And so I sort of searched, just trying desperately to find a better option. And I came across First Direct. I am still with First Direct. And I'm in Brazil. So right now the UK is 4 hours ahead. So if I'm doing my banking and it's 11 o'clock at night, because as we all know, that tends to be the time when we're having to do our bloody banking and something's not working. And I call First Direct in England at 11 o'clock at night, my time in Brazil, and in one ring, somebody picks up. Still. Now that to me is so incredible. And even back to 2001, for me, this was, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like, this is the most extraordinary thing. I can't believe that HSBC hasn't figured this out, because HSBC owns First Direct. But yet yesterday I was desperately I'm trying to figure out my key card thing for HSBC for my business banking, and the battery's running out. So I'm needing to link up the other one. Literally 1 hour I tried doing that, and I'm trying to get on the chat, but then I get busy on something else, and the chat still haven't managed to do it. I still haven't managed to sort it out.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because one of the things I talk about in the book in terms of I talk about these enablers, the kind of things you need in the culture. One of the things is about ambition. And I think that point about First Direct picking up in one ring is really important. They've always described themselves as being pioneers of kind of fantastic customer experience. Pioneers of amazing service, I think, is the line that's on the wall when you go and visit. And they have this searing ambition to just be brilliant for customers. Now, at the moment, so many organizations you phone up, they kind of say, unexpectedly high call volume, it's going to take about 45 minutes. And then that's it. That's okay. And increasingly, this is happening. This lowering of ambition that, well, waiting 5 minutes is okay. Waiting 10 minutes is okay. Waiting half an hour is okay, because it's unexpectedly busy, despite the fact we've got so much data coming into organizations. So we should know exactly how busy it's going to be at different times. There shouldn't be anything unexpected about it. And if there is, you should sort it pretty quickly. It's just this point about actually you just lack an ambition. If you've really got that, and I'll talk maybe later about my story about Swiss Rails, but that is all about, and First Direct is all about having this incredible ambition to be great for customers. And if you have that ambition, you can do great things. You can give a great service and people will recommend you and want to stay with you and tell other people. But as soon as you lower your sights and you lower your expectations, it's really easy just to become distinctly average and just start taking your customers for granted. In fact, just when we launched the book, we did a survey with customers, and I think it was 83% of people said they think that organisations now take their customers for granted, which is
wow, that's terrible. Isn't that terrible?
It's terrible. It's pretty useful if you've got a book coming out on the topic. But it is a terrible statistic overall. 81% said they thought organisations were more interested in cutting costs than the customer experience. So it's a problem.
It is a problem. You talk in the book about the 3 myths. You talk about this at the start of the book. So loyalty, feedback, and ROI. So, instead of loyalty, organizations need to focus on usefulness. Instead of feedback surveys, on genuine understanding. And instead of ROI, on the cost of inaction. Now, I love this. I think it's super insightful. And I just wonder if you can bring to life, what is the return on being human-centric or being, focusing on that human experience in your mind?
Yeah, I think the return on ROI is a really, really interesting one. I'll tell you a story to bring it to life, actually, that these in the book. It only happened a few weeks ago, but I had to buy a bow tie. So at Christmas, I got kind of bullied into wearing kind of black suit, black tie, black bow tie for our Christmas do by the younger ones in the office. So I had to buy this bow tie, and I left it pretty late, so I had to get it next day delivery. So I bought it off of one of the UK's upstanding retailers, paid £7 extra for next day delivery. And the next day, the van turns up, the guy gets out of the van, he looks at the house, he gets back in the van and he drives off. And I'm like basically waving to him. We've got the Christmas lights on and everything. And I immediately get an email, sorry you weren't in. I'm like, well, I couldn't have been more in. Anyway, I phoned them up and unexpectedly high call volumes, might be half an hour. Oh, after about 35 minutes, I get through. I explain the situation. I say, look, I need it to be delivered tomorrow, but also can I get a refund on my £7 that I paid for next day delivery? Which really, if they've been smart, they should have done as an automatic refund anyway, but put that to one side for now. So she said, okay, let me think about that. So she goes away, she comes back and she said, we can offer you a £5 gift voucher. And I said, well, that's not enough, is it? Because I paid £7 for the next day delivery, and also it's a gift voucher.
It's a gift voucher, so you have to...
It's like, I can't buy anything from you for £5, so I'm going to have to spend more money. She goes away, she comes back after a few minutes, and she says, okay, we can offer you £7 as a gift voucher, but that's the maximum our IT system can do. And the next day delivery had actually been £7.95. And obviously, you know me a little bit now. I'm in this now. This is what I do, so I'm not... Anyone normal would have just gone, all right. But I'm like, no, I mean, my family know they're going into another room. They know I'm going to be on the phone for a while. And I said, no. I said, this is ridiculous. I want to tell her because, it cost me £7 and now I've been on the phone for like an hour and I want it in cash because I don't want to have to spend it yourself. So she said, well, I'm going to have to ask my manager, but that might take 20, 25 minutes or so. So I said, yeah, I'll wait.
I'll wait.
Which I didn't think she thought I was going to say. So she disappears off. She comes back after 10 minutes, and by this time I've been on the phone for over an hour. And she says, okay, we can give you a £10 in cash. I was like, fine. And you wonder why they've got unexpectedly high call volume. And this is kind of the point around the ROI, is that there's this view, and I talk about this in the book, that there's this view that to make things better for customers, you have to prove it's going to make you money. You have to prove there's going to be a revenue return on investment, that this is going to help people buy more stuff. But actually, some stuff does do that. But the reality is bad customer experience is really expensive to provide. Like, it creates failure demand. I worked with one company once, 30% of the calls coming into their contact center were repeat phone calls from people that have been rushed off the phone earlier in the day and had to phone back because they weren't happy that the result that they got. When I was in HSBC, 35% of our complaints globally were repeat complaints, reopened complaints because people weren't happy with the first outcome they got. So bad customer experience is expensive to provide. And so if you think about it in terms of, well, if we could give a good customer experience and make changes, how is that going to make us more efficient? How is that going to save us money? And what's the cost of inaction? If we don't do anything, how many customers are leaving as a result? How much money are we wasting as a result? Once you start seeing it in that frame and you see that making things better for the customers also makes a more commercially effective organization, you get rid of any premise of having to prove it's going to make you £1 million over X number of years. So that's the premise of the ROI. And I got my £10 and I got my bow tie. So I was happy.
Did you get the bow tie?
I got the bow tie in the end. No idea how to tie it up, but I had it at least. Yeah.
You're ready for the Christmas party. Yeah, that's such a good point. What you're doing is you're turning it on its head and just saying, okay, so just think about it. If you don't do it, what is going to happen? And then you sort of think, oh yeah, customer, you just think of the Sky example. If a company is not human centric, so therefore, if it is just, okay, try to get as much money out of the people as possible, blah, blah, blah. People don't believe in the purpose of the place. They don't really care. They're not happy, higher turnover. They don't care about the customers because you don't care about the customers. Then of course, and then it just is sort of this horrible experience for everybody. And then you can kind of imagine what that place looks like. But then if you turn it around and you think of the examples of the places that people are, I was talking to a friend of mine, she was looking for a job, but she was looking for a company. She had a list of companies. She's amazing. She had a list of companies and she said, I will only work for a certain number of these companies because I believe in them and they're human centric. And so she ended up getting a job at Lego. She's the marketing director of Lego. And she said, honestly, I feel so honored to have got this job. I feel so lucky to be here. I absolutely adore the way that they treat us. I adore the way, I love their vision. I love the ideas. I love what they do when people come into the business. I mean, that's what you want.
It's exactly what you want. And if you have colleagues, this is not new news, but when you've got really happy, motivated colleagues, you get really great customer experience. That's part of the thing with First Direct. I was there on their birthday a few years ago, and they had like a string quartet playing. They had a big Ferris wheel outside. When you walk into First Direct, they've got concierge desk, and that's for anybody. Anybody that works in First Direct can take anything to this concierge desk, and it'll get sorted for them through the day. If they need a pair of shoes mended, and there's no hierarchy there. I can't remember her name. I can't remember the name of the lady that's on the desk, but they might have even had two people now because they have so many people. But if they've got one of the first places to have a creche on the site. Yeah, it's just an amazing atmosphere. People want to work there. People are happy working there. And lo and behold, when you phone up, the person who answers is normally pretty cheery and happy to be speaking to you as well. So it's a really interesting balance. And just to add on to what you were saying as well about what if we didn't do this, like you say, one of the other myths is the myth of feedback and the fact that we live in this epidemic of feedback requests that you can't have any experience without getting a survey. But the flip for that is so many organizations send emails from do not reply email addresses. And I was chatting to an organization the other day who does this. And I said, well, what if you turned off all of your surveys? Like you stopped spending millions of pounds a year on all of your surveys that customers don't want, but you let people reply to your emails and you use the money you've saved from the surveys to recruit a few more people to answer the emails. I said, wouldn't that make a better customer experience and also still give you feedback because people can email you when they want to email you and tell you what they think? Wouldn't that just be a better way round of doing it? And it's like, oh yeah, that could work. But it's one of those things where you kind of go, well, we can't reply to emails because we just don't have the time or money or people to deal with it. But we can employ a whole team of people over here to review 200,000 NPS surveys a year. And it's this interesting, different parts of the organization, different parts of the organization. They don't work together.
It's funny. Sometimes it just sort of takes that outside perspective, doesn't it? Just to sort of say, well, why don't you just talk to people?
Well, yeah. And also, and Charlie talks about this a lot, the things that I'm describing and maybe gently mocking about how organizations work, they make sense. Like, it's a bit like the hiring IBM thing. Like if you just said, well, we'd like to send out surveys to our customers to ask them what they think about it. That makes sense. Yeah. Makes sense. It's like a good thing to do. We're going to ask them a few simple questions. It will take them a couple of minutes just so we regularly know whether customers are happy or not. Makes sense. Like it makes it, you can see how these things work. But then they reach scale and then it starts to become surveying every customer every time. and it becomes an unbelievable amount of feedback that you can't do anything with.
Yeah.
And that's where people stop thinking about it and just go along with the ride. But no one really challenges it, because the fundamental principle kind of does make sense. In the same way, it kind of makes sense to say, well, we're going to put this new initiative in. Is it going to make us money? Yeah, kind of makes sense to do that from an organizational point of view. Again, you just need to really stop and reconsider it. And I think most people in organizations now are so busy, we're so like deluged with emails, and, you just head down back-to-back meetings. It's actually very hard just to stop and get up and think.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So about outside in perspectives, how that is just so important for companies. And we've talked about that, but I'm just wondering, why in your mind is that important? And I'm just curious to know, considering a local perspective, but also international. I'm obviously asking the international, obviously, because that's what we do. And I think that it's so important. I'm just curious to know what you think, but also from a local point of view and, that outside in.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, there's an exercise I talk about in the book that I'd love to do with your audience. It is so international, which is about if you ask people to draw a map of the world. And so if you are at home listening to this, get a pen and paper, pause this for a second, draw a map of the world, and then unpause it and come back. Because what happens is when you ask people to draw a map of the world, nearly everyone does the same thing. They draw the country that they're most familiar with or that they're in the middle, and they normally draw that exponentially larger than it really is. And then the further they get away from that, the hazier it becomes, the worse the drawing gets. So if you're in the UK, everyone forgets to draw Japan, even though Japan's big and famous, but everyone forgets to draw. Well, that's not quite true. A third of people roughly remember to draw Japan, and then the other lot forget. And this is because how our brain works. We all see the world from the inside out. We all see the world from where we are outward. And that matters because this is how organizations work. People are closer to their own colleagues, their own business, their own industry, their own regulators. And your customers are a bit like Japan in that you're big and important and they're there, and there's just lots of layers. Now that gets exacerbated when you're starting to work internationally. I think it matters locally and matters internationally, because you need to really, really put in the effort to understand the different groups of customers you might be serving. And those customers, or, they could be customers, it could be colleagues. If you're leading an organization, it could be your team. Could be very different depending on the country they're in, on the culture they're in. It could be very different depending on what's happening in that country or in that culture at the time. Some of the family norms might be different. The work norms might be different. But what happens with this inside out way of thinking, and this is as true in leadership as it is with customer experience, is you presume everyone sees the world the way you see it. So you start to design, and we had an example of this I talk about in the book, but you start to design products based on, well, I would like it. Do you presume everyone else is going to like it? Or you start to lead your team in the way that you think, well, this is how I like to be managed. So that's how everyone else wants to be managed. I remember years ago, my first ever leadership course I went on, I was told the first 3 rules of people management is know your people, know your people, know your people. Because it's only by really knowing your people that you can then, mix your style, change your style to get the most out of them. And so whether it's leadership or customer experience or proposition development, being able to go outside in to really understand what matters in people's lives and what's driving their behaviors and what's affecting them in their culture. That's how you create great products and how you create great teams. Otherwise, you'd always do it from a very narrow end of your perspective, and you'll be lucky if you end up getting it right.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's so powerful also, I think, just from, just also innovative thinking and creativity and, and also, you touched on it, cultural intelligence. It's that ability to be able to, you can't learn cultural intelligence from a book, and people have to give it to you. And so both from the point of view of leadership and hiring people who are different to yourself, managing people who are different, being able to understand those idiosyncrasies, but also from a customer experience point of view, it's being able to empathize with people who are different. If someone is coming to you with culturally very, very different, it could seem aggressive, but actually it's just, the nature of that individual. And it's just being able to respond in different ways. And, and also, as I say, that innovative thinking, creativity, the more that your brain is open, the more, and if you're empowered where you work, the more you're able to see different opportunities and come up with different solutions for things. And it's just so important to come out of that siloism.
Yeah, exactly. There's about 5 different tangents I could go off on there actually about what you just said about the importance of immersing with customers, really understanding their behaviour, because customers won't necessarily tell you the truth, not because they're lying, but because they'll only tell you a version of themselves. Just on that last point though, just to pick up on that, because I haven't spoken about this much with the book, but one of the enablers I talk about is perspective.
Yes.
And all organisations that do this really well that are able to take a really broad perspective. And I tell this story about a guy that came in to see me at the bank when I was looking after small businesses, and he had this great idea. He was going to launch a taxi bike going around Reading.
Yes,
so it was like like an 8-person bike that you could hire. You could only go from the station to the football stadium and back again along a really busy road. And I thought, this is a terrible idea. Like, how are you going to have 8 people together all riding the bike? What's going to happen if it rains? You've only got one route. Absolutely rubbish idea. So I said no. And then about 5 years later, I was in Amsterdam, and one of those beer bikes goes by with a stag do on and like 8 blokes pedaling around the city on a bike. And I thought, oh, actually it wasn't going to do it. And Stephen Johnson calls this the adjacent possible, being able to connect other ideas and other situations and scenarios that might then bring different ideas to life. Funnily enough, literally just 2 days ago, someone on Twitter who's read the book sent me a video of some of these bikes, actual taxi bikes now. I've got to check what city they're in, but they are just being used as taxi bikes. And it was my narrow-mindedness and naivety, because I hadn't got my perspective broad enough to see what else it could be used for.
And I just, one thing that I'm talking about in my book, it's interesting because, you know, you've got your perspectives and you've got your background and you've also got your skills and where you shine, and I've got mine, and they're different, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And what's amazing as well is understanding where we shine, but then to have a team of people who are different and actually being open to that and being able to lean into that. It's that empathy. And you talk about that in the book. You talk about, you know, the importance of being empowered, but also the importance of empathetic people in business. The importance of that, I think, comes into just back to, I think, customer service and how those teams run. I'm curious to know kind of what you think about that.
It's exactly right, that kind of empathetic side. You know, but that has to be allowed to come out. You know, funnily enough, we've been doing some work with a company recently, and the original question was, can you help train the team to be more empathetic? You can't really, but what you can do is get all the stuff out of their way to allow them to be their human empathetic selves. The story you might remember in the book about the yellow chair that I bought, I think kind of brings it to life. When
to get into your car?
Yeah, in my car, I tried to buy should I quickly tell that story?
Tell the story, it's so good.
Just after moving to the house again about 5 years ago, I decided I wanted one of those big, comfortable reading chairs. Obviously, I forgot I had 2 children, so I was never going to have time to sit and read in it. But anyway, went to a furniture store, and they had a half-price ex-display sale on. And I thought, oh, this is perfect, you know. So I saw this really big, comfortable yellow chair. It was half price. I thought, oh, that's the one I'm going to get. But the only problem was we'd driven to the store with my wife and my son, and cars full of rubbish and full of kid stuff, quite a small car. I said to the guy, can I buy it and get it delivered? And he said, no, because it's ex-display furniture, you have to take it home yourself. I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. So I went away and I came back to him and I said, okay, can I take the chair out to my car, which is in their car park just a few meters outside the door? Can I take the chair out and see if I can fit it in? If I can, I'll buy it. And if not, I'll bring it back in. He goes upstairs and asks his manager, comes back down. No, you can only take it off the premises if you bought the chair. I said, okay, can I buy the chair, take it out, try and fit it in the car? If it doesn't fit, bring it back in, get a refund. He goes up and asks his manager, comes back down. No, I'm afraid you can only, once you bought it, no refund on ex-display furniture. Okay? But okay, can I buy the chair, leave it here for an hour while I drive my wife home and drive my kid home, clear out the car, come back? He goes and asks his manager, comes back down. No, once you bought the chair, you have to take it immediately. And I felt like I'm in one of these like box, bag of grain, chicken, crossing a river puzzle. Was like, there's an answer in here somewhere, but I can't quite work out what it is. So eventually I say, right, I'm just going to risk it. I'm going to take it. And this guy is like 21 and muscly, like everything I'm not. And I said, can you at least help me? I bought the chair. Can you at least help me carry it to the car? And he's like, yeah, no problem at all. He's like, but I can only carry it to the door because I'm not insured to carry it outside of the door. So he's true to his word. He carries the chair with me to the door, puts it down, and him and his colleagues stand and watch while me and my wife, who's 4'10", struggled to get this chair over to the car while my son was playing chicken in the car park, just charging around all over the place. It was the most ridiculous experience. But the thing is, everyone knows that's a ridiculous experience. Like, if that guy and his manager are in the audience while I'm doing a presentation and I'm telling this story, they know it's a ridiculous, everyone knows it's a ridiculous situation. But that lack of empowerment, just that, and that rigidity to the rules and the standing behind the rules rather than pushing in front of them. You know, I was there for an hour and a half. I'm trying to buy a chair. They're trying to sell a chair. This should be a pretty easy transaction. And again, failure demand, how much time being wasted doing out. So yeah, I think it's a great example of just that lack of empathy, that lack of humanity and the problems that causes, albeit it's quite a funny story.
And it's really interesting because for all of the faults of Brazil is it's a crazy country in many ways and so many difficulties faced because it is a developing country or a country in the global south. But one thing that is amazing is there's a word in Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, called jeitinho. Jeitinho is the little way. There's always a way. And the jeitinho can be seen as kind of a negative thing, but actually the jeitinho in my mind is an incredible thing because there's always a way. And Brazilians are incredibly innovative and they don't follow the rules, which actually is amazing. So one thing that's really interesting when it comes to things like customer service, in some ways terrible on sort of the big corporates like the telephone companies and the TV companies, the horrible. But when you get to just the day-to-day kind of small shops, the customer service is so human because Brazilians are very human and they're also very innovative. The experience is very different. And it's amazing because even if they weren't allowed to, even if there was no insurance, they'd be like, I don't even really care. I don't even know what would happen if I did anything. You know, it's like, I'll just take this for you, you know? So it's quite fun. Yeah. Well, we are coming to the end of the podcast. Is there anything that sort of sums up what we've talked about today?
I did a presentation a few years ago. And I said, in the presentation, ultimately, the only thing that matters is how you make people feel. Yeah. Which, you know, I think is a nice quote, but obviously, Maya Angelou, other people have said something similar. But what I liked is I said that quote. So as a thank you gift for the presentation, they sent me a block of wood with that quote on, but they managed to spell my name wrong on it.
Oh, no.
So I've kept that as a souvenir. It's so brilliant about this quote. The only thing that matters is how you make people feel. And then they spelled my name wrong on the gift. So I thought that was quite funny. This quote, and I don't know who said it, but the quote is, "You are everyone you've ever met." And I really like that because I think for me, there is something about every interaction you have with people, whether it's a brief conversation, a longer term relationship, whether it's something you oversee on the train or overhear, it forms part of who you are. It forms a memory or an experience. You have a reaction to it. And I think that's really mattered to me in terms of my career. And I can see, you know, in terms of who I am professionally, all the different bits of people I've met over the years, managers who've been brilliant, mentors who've been fantastic, people that have worked with me that have challenged me or inspired me, people that I've met randomly, friends, family. I can see that in me. But also, I suppose the reason I picked the quote, I like to think in the book, all the stories are just things that have happened, people I've met, things that stay there. And I like that because I think you prize every interaction a little bit more. I think you can take, if you're interested, there's another quote, to be interesting, be interested. If you're interested, I think you can take something from everybody, really. So yeah, that's probably my quote.
Love it. Now, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to tell our listeners?
I promised I'd tell the Swiss rail story. So maybe
tell the Swiss rail story. Yes, of course.
Which is the best experience I've ever had. Which is just before COVID, I was on a train, doing some work with a company that does rail journeys, holidays. I was on a train going through Switzerland. And my colleague who was Swiss had told me how brilliantly efficient the Swiss rail system was. So I was delighted when it broke down. But then something interesting happened, which was after about 2 minutes after the train had broken down, the guard came along and spoke to us all because there was a group of about 30 of us and nearly everyone was an octogenarian. And he said, look, I know you've got a train to catch, a connection to catch at Zurich. I'm really sorry, you're probably going to miss that, but don't worry, I'm going to keep you informed. I'm going to help you get to the right platform. If you have any problems, you just let me know. He walks off. 2 minutes later, we get a phone call from the head of operations at Swiss Rail. I'm really sorry. I've heard about your train breaking down. I know you're a big group traveling through our country. You just give me a call if you need help, but the guard will look after you. A couple of minutes later, train starts moving. The train guard comes back down about 5 minutes after that. And he says, okay, I'm really sorry. We're about 15 minutes late. You are going to miss your connection when we get to Zurich. But your next train is going to go from platform 14. That's going to leave 15 minutes after that. It's a big, complicated station. I'm going to have someone there at the door to meet you and walk you around to the new train. I'm so sorry about this problem. When we get there, true to his word, the door opens. There's a member of staff there with an umbrella. We follow her around the station, the platform 14. The train's waiting for us. They've already reserved the carriage for us on the next train because we had one reserved on the previous train. And as we got on, they gave us tea and coffee vouchers for the inconvenience. And we ended up getting into our destination about 20 minutes late. Now, to end where we started, if I'm on the train into London and we get in 20 minutes late, I'm high-fiving. We're hugging. We don't know what to do with all the extra time we've got left because we've only got in 20 minutes late. And I think it's a matter of ambition. In Swiss Rail, they've made you a promise that they're going to get you there and that's what you've paid your money for. And if anything falls below that service, they're going to be damn sure they're going to go and put it right. And sometimes that level of ambition, I think, is missing in organisation. So it's an incredible experience. And my friend who was Swiss was very smug as well about that. But maybe that's the story to end on.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story to end on. And I think that's the thing. Ending on ambition, I think, is a great way to end this, because back to how we started at the beginning of this conversation, all companies must have started with some kind of ambition, some kind of reason to be. And I think it's a matter of everyone just stopping for a moment and reminding themselves why they're doing what they do and what was that ambition.
It's exactly that. It's a case of ambition, and it's a case of being able to see the world from the outside and being able to question exactly why you're doing things that you're doing. And if you have the combination of those two, if you have that kind of curiosity and you have ambition, then the combination of those two is incredibly powerful.
Totally. Oh, John, such a pleasure to finally meet you and to have had the opportunity to have this conversation. Everyone needs to read this book. Of course, I'm going to put it in the blurb. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Take care.
Hey everyone, this is Philippa again. I hope you enjoyed listening. Now this is your chance to get involved with TIE. If you work in the commercial world, whatever your profession, your position, or your experience, then TIE could be for you. You may have been in business for decades, but have always felt there's another way. Or you may just have a few years experience, but want to do more. Equally, if you want to create game-changing employees and see your company impact the world, we've got you covered. TIE has never been more necessary than right now, and you can be a part of it. Reach out to me at philippa@theinternationalexchange.co.uk and I can tell you more. Or join the TIE Accelerator info session for more information. apply.tieaccelerator.com. Better leaders, better companies, better world. I'm your host, Philippa White. This podcast has been co-produced by Berna Vieira and me, music by Berna Vieira, and artwork by Kelps Vahais. I hope we'll meet again soon.